There's this massive misconception about highly intelligent people out there, and I'm absolutely thrilled we're diving into this explainer today, because we're going to decode exactly what is actually going on inside a high IQ mind. We're pulling directly from the fascinating psychology in our source material to figure out why brilliant people behave the way they do in everyday life. We've distilled all that complex research right into this visual roadmap, so let's just get straight to it.
Picture this. You're in a conversation, and you notice a really smart friend or colleague just check out. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, wow, they are being so aloof, or, maybe even a little snobby? It's a super common assumption, right? We see that sudden silence and immediately think they're judging the room. But today, we're totally reframing that assumption, because as we're going to see, this isn't an ego trip at all. It is literally all about cognitive bandwidth.
Which brings us to Section 1, the myth of arrogance.
Okay, let's dive into this. The psychology here shows us that high IQ minds don't just solve complex math problems differently, their actual tolerance for everyday environments changes too. People look at them and see this perceived superiority, but what is actually happening behind the scenes is rapid mental exhaustion. See, highly intelligent minds inherently crave clarity, depth, and psychological consistency. Their brains are absolutely hardwired to seek those things out. So when those elements are missing from a chat, they get frustrated, really fast. They aren't looking down on the interaction. Their cognitive engine is just kind of stalling out because it isn't getting the right fuel.
Moving right along to Section 2, craving depth and authenticity.
So what exactly triggers that instant defensive disconnect in a smart person's brain? Well, the first huge mental drain is repetitive, empty conversation. You know the kind. Surface-level, office gossip, totally predictable opinions, basically conversations with absolutely zero depth. The source material points out that intelligent minds are actively hunting for novelty and cognitive stimulation. When an interaction feels like it's just mentally spinning its wheels, their attention naturally wanders off. Again, it's not arrogance. Sometimes their brain is just desperately screaming for something a bit more complex to chew on.
And that naturally leads us to this fascinating psychological quirk: inconsistency detection. High IQ brains are practically built for advanced pattern recognition. Because of that, they are insanely quick at spotting what you might call fake confidence. When someone is leaning on exaggerated certainty or, throwing around this forced superiority or performative intelligence, it sets off massive alarm bells for a high IQ person. It becomes glaringly obvious to them, like almost instantly, that all that loud confidence is completely hollow.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real-world outcome of that inconsistency detection. Highly intelligent people have zero patience for loud, fake confidence. Picture a boardroom where someone is just loudly dominating the room with a totally flawed strategy, just to sound authoritative. A smart mind completely checks out of that dynamic. Instead, they are infinitely more impressed by thoughtful uncertainty. Someone who just says, honestly, I don't know, but let's figure it out together, displays a level of psychological consistency that a high IQ brain deeply respects. Performative confidence just feels like a massive waste of their mental processing power.
Which takes us to Section 3, rejecting intellectual laziness.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this concept of cognitive flexibility. You'd probably assume that highly intelligent people always need to be right and just hate being challenged, right? Actually, psychology links intelligence directly to cognitive flexibility and analytical reasoning. That means high IQ folks actually really respect disagreement. They can comfortably sit with and even totally enjoy opposing opinions as long as those opinions are rooted in critical thinking and analysis. A good analytical debate actually fires them up.
But what they absolutely cannot stomach is intellectual laziness. This is the stuff that drives them up the wall. We're talking about blind thinking, just accepting ideas without a second thought, running purely on emotion, and stubbornly ignoring solid facts just to protect an ego. A high IQ mind just fundamentally short circuits when trying to engage with someone who flat out refuses to think critically, simply because there is no logical path left to actually navigate that conversation.
Next up, Section 4, guarding precious mental energy. We really need to talk about this absolute non-negotiable need for intelligent people to guard their mental bandwidth. Just look at the contrast between endless emotional chaos, the impulsive reactions, the constant drama, versus predictable emotional regulation. Now, let's be super clear here. Smart people do not avoid emotions entirely. They aren't robots. What they run away from is unnecessary emotional disorder. The psychology tells us they prefer predictability because navigating constant chaotic drama drains their mental battery insanely fast. They crave emotional regulation because it acts as a literal shield for their bandwidth.
And in that exact same vein, they are fiercely protective of their time. This comes from a cognitive pattern known as future-oriented thinking. Highly intelligent people are acutely aware of time passing, and I don't just mean clock watching. I mean they have this hyper-awareness of life itself. This future-oriented mindset makes them incredibly sensitive to meaningless repetition. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be hyper-productive every single second of the day, but it absolutely means they despise feeling mentally stuck or just throwing their precious moments away.
Let's move on and see how this builds into a really clear picture of why these specific behaviors trigger such an intense reaction in high IQ minds. When you see someone dodging empty conversations, it's driven by their craving for stimulation. When they shut down a refusal to think critically, they are utilizing their cognitive flexibility. Avoiding that emotional chaos, that's just protecting mental energy. Spotting fake confidence relies heavily on pattern detection, and their total frustration with wasted time is driven right by that future-oriented thinking. Every single one of these so-called intolerable behaviors is directly tethered to a very real psychological driver. So let's just do a rapid-fire recap of these 5 specific triggers to really lock this in. The 5 major mental drains are shallow repetition, blind thinking, emotional chaos, fake confidence, and a constant waste of time. I really want you to take a second and think about how just keeping these 5 things in mind could completely transform the way you communicate with the highly intelligent colleagues and loved ones in your own life. When you start recognizing these things as mental drains instead of personal insults, honestly, it's a total game changer for your daily interactions.
And finally, Section 5, Why Smart People Go Quiet.
We've seen exactly what drains them, so let's look at the ultimate result of all this. So the crucial point is summarized beautifully in this quote, directly from our source material. Because intelligence changes more than thought, it changes tolerance. Let that powerful thought sink in for just a second. The psychology makes one thing crystal clear. High IQ individuals don't just arbitrarily dismiss everything around them. But when they are constantly bombarded by those 5 mental drains, a brilliant mind going quiet or withdrawing isn't a sign of them acting superior. It is an act of pure, essential mental self-preservation. Sometimes, the smartest people become quiet simply because too much of the noise around them is just mentally exhausting.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly important question to ponder. When a highly intelligent person goes quiet, are they actually judging the room, or are they just protecting their mental energy? I really hope this explainer gave you a fresh, structured look at the inner workings of the high IQ mind. So the very next time you see that quiet genius in your life totally disconnect from a chat, I challenge you to look a little closer at the environment around them. Thanks so much for exploring this fascinating psychology with us today, and keep learning.